Well, the ongoing evacuation of Afghanistan continues. Apparently, the situation is even worse than I realized. Silly me, I assumed that by this point there weren't very many Americans left, and the concern was simply over, I mean, not that it's a simple concern, it's a pretty big concern, trying to get out all of the Afghans who were collaborators with the United States, people who not only worked as translators uh, but were a part of the collaborationist regime in Kabul, all of whom we can imagine are going to be targeted. There were videos going around yesterday, which of course we can't show on YouTube, that certainly seemed to be, I can't confirm it 100%, but as best as I could tell, there was a guy riding around on his motorcycle, and he was just holding his phone and videoing all of the bodies in the streets. It seems like they're executing a lot of people. And so I would think, at the very least, if you were a collaborator with the Americans over the past 20 years, your life is probably at stake. But it's worse than that. It's not just those guys you have to worry about. Apparently, there are, according to John Kirby, there were between 5 to 10,000 Americans still in the country. They don't know exactly how many. And then Jen Psaki came out later today and said, no, it's 11,000 Americans. Who knows if that number's going to go up? We have no idea. But certainly, I guess we could say at this point, over 10,000 Americans are still stuck in that country. And who knows, maybe, they're not even all in Kabul. Maybe they're, spread out around the country a little bit. And so who knows how many of them are going to end up getting killed or captured in all of this chaos. I mean, there are military checkpoints everywhere now that have been set up by the Taliban. I would think that it would be in the Taliban's best interest to try and perhaps capture some of these Americans, use them as bargaining chips. Although I don't know, maybe they would think, hey, we don't want to go down the Iranian hostage crisis route. Maybe we don't want to burn our bridges too much. They are trying, at least on TV, the Taliban, to sound a bit magnanimous. They're saying, hey, we don't want to discourage Western investment. We still want them to come and, bring their money here and try and build up our economy. They seem very concerned about that, which I find interesting. Hey, please don't abandon our mining sector. Please come build hotels here. They're kind of that sort of thing. They still want economic relations with the West. Interestingly enough, the Taliban gave an exclusive interview to Israeli state television, of all places. You wouldn't really expect that, but I guess, hey, they're trying to be nice even to the Jews. And so maybe we can hope that given all of this, that they're trying to be optical, it would seem. Maybe they will go soft on any actual Americans that they find. I don't expect that they would treat collaborators, Afghan collaborators, as well as American citizens themselves. But maybe the Americans, will get spared for the time being because the Taliban are trying to keep good optics as the situation unfolds. But just knowing that there are as many as 11,000 Americans reportedly still in the country that have yet to be evacuated, I think that makes this whole situation quite a bit more serious. And those Americans are not even being offered shelter at the Hamid Karzai International Airport, where all the chaos has been unfolding, and that is the one place that the U.S. seems to still have control over, or at least they claim to have control over it. They're being told to shelter in place, and then they'll say, hey, we'll tell you when you can come here. Well, who knows when they're told that they can come to the airport, if they're going to be able to come to the airport. If there's not exactly freedom of movement throughout the city at the moment, or at least it would not appear. There's military checkpoints through different neighborhoods, as tends to happen in capital cities after a major war. I mean, there were checkpoints in Berlin all the way from 1945 through 1991. That's why Berlin was divided, because the Soviets decided to close off their sector. And so we have a similar situation here, except the Taliban controls every sector of the city. And, who knows if they will be so magnanimous as to allow Americans to move about through the checkpoints on their way to the airport. And with that said, even if they let some Americans through, I can't see them letting collaborationists through. Afghans who collaborated with the American occupiers, I would imagine, if they show up at a checkpoint and say, hey, state your business. Why do you need to pass through this checkpoint? And they say, oh, I'm on my way to the airport to escape from you people because, I'm a traitor in your eyes. That's not going to go over well for you. So, it's hard for me to see at this point how they're going to get the translators and all the other folks, even if they are able to get the Americans. I mean, at this point, maybe the least they could do, or the best they could hope for, is just to get the American citizens out. Because if you've got thousands of Americans still in that country, you can't afford to try and push the Taliban to let you take your non-citizen allies too. But hey, I mean, that's the purpose of these ongoing negotiations with the Taliban, since the U.S. broke the original deal with the Taliban, which said, hey, get out whoever you want by May. We're not going to mess with you. Now that the U.S. is so far past that deadline, they're going to have to renegotiate and try and beg the Taliban to let them take, whoever they can at this point. But the Taliban really holds all the cards. And so it's just, as the time goes on, it becomes more and more evident just how dire the consequences were of breaking the original peace deal that had been negotiated by Zalmay Khalilzad. I mean, I think if I were the Taliban, I would say to the Americans, well, gee, okay, we'll give you your citizens, sure. You can have those people, they can go. But, we're not going to just let these seditionists and insurrectionists, to borrow a phrase from the Americans, who collaborated with this occupying army, we're going to prosecute them. We're going to throw the book at them. And if you Americans have any problem with that, well, just look at what you did to the folks who were protesting and rioting on January the 6th. Those folks, weren't combatants. They weren't even helping combatants. They were not aiding in that sort of thing at all. And they are being persecuted in this country as seditionists or as seditious treasonists or whatever combination of adjectives and nouns you want to use. I think that the Taliban has because of the way that the Biden administration is treating dissidents here at home, there's a case to be made that they have the moral authority to say America gets to prosecute their traitors and we Afghans get to prosecute our traitors as well. And how could any of the bleeding heart libs who want to welcome with open arms hundreds of thousands of Afghans into this country, how could they dispute what the Taliban says there? I mean, objectively, the Afghan collaborators, the translators, and whoever else, certainly folks who were soldiers or police officers or intelligence officers working in the U.S.-backed regime in Kabul, they are objectively far worse than the folks who are getting persecuted over January the 6th. If you believe that treason and going against the government is so bad, then you have to admit that these people are much, much worse than the January 6th folks. And so how could you say that they should be freed, that they should have their freedom, that they should be allowed to flee the country? The folks who rioted on January the 6th, not only are they not allowed to flee the country, they're put into solitary confinement because the judges say, hey, there's such a risk of these folks fleeing the country. We're afraid they might jump on a plane and go, so we can't let them out. That's the last thing we have to let them do. And they are accused of doing far, far less to harm their country than America's Afghan collaborators. And so I'm not saying this as someone who wants these people to perish. Not at all. I think that it's terrible what will likely be done to them. I think that they're going to meet a horrible fate. But, you have to I have to be consistent in my logic here. I also think that what's going to happen to the January 6th folks is bad. Hopefully they won't end up dead. But again, they did, they're far less treacherous in the eyes of their or, in terms of what they did to harm their government, supposedly. I'm not someone who thinks treason and sedition are bad things. I think that they're noble things. I think that you should applaud and reward people who stand up against bad governments doing bad things. I think that it's noble, even if you're helping an occupying army, to fight, a group like the Taliban, because I think the Taliban are icky, and they're bad people, and I wouldn't want to live under them. And if they were trying to rule over me, I would happily work with a foreign army, assuming that, the foreign army isn't significantly worse. Yep, so the clock's ticking. Things could get real ugly real fast if these people don't get out. There's going to be a pretty short window, I think, for all of these folks to flee to safety. And I don't know what's going to happen. It's not a funny situation. It's not a happy situation. I mean, it's a good thing that the U.S. is gone. This is going to happen at some point, but as I've said, it's too bad that on the way out, so many more people potentially could suffer than otherwise needed to. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.